future situation. Hello, hello, all you beautiful transformative singers. I am Dr. Stephanie Anduri.
I'm Dr. Graham Anduri.
Tonight we are going to talk to you about the language that we use to describe the singing process. We have noticed for years and years that so much of the language that is sort of baked into singing and into teaching singing is just detrimental. And sort of teaches us to absorb limiting ideas into our bodies and restrictive ideas into our bodies. And so, as pedagogues, we wanted to address some of those. We're sure that some of you have heard a lot of this language used before in your own study of your voice. And so, we just want to offer some alternatives and have you thinking about your voices very differently than some of the old ways.
That's right. So, because here's the cool thing, and I'm just reading about this right now, and I'm reading a book about how the neuroscience of emotion works. And essentially, when we have a word for something, we have a concept for what that thing is, and different words make different concepts. They kind of elicit different concepts for us, and so we feel differently about what those concepts are based on the words that we use. Words are powerful. And so if we use, whether we're the teacher teaching the lesson or whether we're the singer taking the lesson, the words that we use about our voices have a very real impact on how our voices function and how we're able to use our voices and how we're able to get out of our own ways, or if we end up getting in our own way because of the language we use. So we're going to go through a whole big list of things, some common things, and if you have things that you're curious about, if you have like, I've used this language before, I've heard this language before, how does this work in a holistic vocal technique sort of way, shoot us a message, leave a comment on this video, and we're happy to have a chat and talk about it.
So. Absolutely. So the first terminology that we want to talk about, actually, before we start talking about this, I would like everyone to sit straight with really good posture. Okay, so now that that is done, now just balance your alignment. Sit with some buoyancy and some release in all of your joints. How does that feel different? So when we're talking about posture, very often it engenders the idea that we should be rigid and totally straight, that our bodies are machines, right? That should stand an exact way. And most often that creates so much limitation and so much tightness in our bodies that's really difficult to maneuver around. And it just doesn't allow for freedom and agility in our bodies. And so we like to talk about balanced alignment or buoyant alignment or feeling suspended. There are so many different ways to talk about the ways that our skeletons hold our bodies up that don't have to include the idea of rigidity.
Right. And different people respond differently to the same language. In fact, that's one of our favorite experiments to do with a whole bunch of students is use the same like 5 different linguistic terms for the same concept and see which one fits the best for that particular student. And usually different students prefer different things. They get better results from different language. So having an arsenal of different words, of different terms, of different ways of describing the same sensations, the same experiences, can be really, really beneficial for you as a singer. And if you're a teacher, it can be really beneficial to have just a lot of ways to help all of your students in whatever ways they need. So
Absolutely.
For me, balanced alignment works great, and posture makes me feel like I'm standing at attention in the military, and it doesn't really help me to sing well. For other people, they haven't noticed. We've done this with a lot of people over the years, and some people don't have a problem with the idea of posture. It doesn't give them that same sense of rigidity. But for many people, it does. We've noticed probably more people have an issue with posture, having good posture, than they do with buoyancy, balance, suspension, something like that.
Alignment, absolutely.
Yeah.
The next big buzzword, and I bet 98% of you have heard this at some point in your lives, is the idea of breath control or even breath support. I would ask you to raise your hands, but this is a Zoom call, and I'm sure that many hands would go up that I wouldn't be able to see. So the idea of breath control just sort of bakes rigidity and limitation into our bodies.
As though there's something wild that needs to be tamed and controlled. Yeah. No, it's breath. The more popular term nowadays is breath management. We tend to use that one as well, but there are so many different ways that we can describe the way that we use breath and the way that air is this kind of it's the medium for sound to travel. But it's so much more than that, and we talk about this in our classes and in our workshops, that breath is really, it's like the spirit of what we are singing. And in ancient languages, breath and spirit are the same word. So breath management means like we're kind of managing that breath, but we're not the ones controlling it. We're not the ones that are like forcing it or creating it or do anything. We're just using the air to make the best sound that we can make.
Absolutely. I love a dear friend of ours, Mark Rivette, said that he uses the terminology to be in command of your body rather than to be in control of it. And it's such a difference for me to think of being in command of my body, that my body has its own natural intelligence, that it knows how to move air, it knows how to free my body, it knows how to be agile, without me having to be consciously in control of it.
Micromanaging every little thing.
Yeah.
Because when we're trying to control everything that happens, we don't trust that our bodies are intelligent. Right. We don't trust that our bodies can do things on its own. And so when you're in command of something, it's like you're the commander with you're kind of steering the ship, but you're letting all of the other little bits and pieces do what they do naturally, and trusting that they will do the job right. So you're trusting that your body knows how to do this thing. You're trusting that it knows how to breathe, how to take in air, how to let go of air. And so that's, being in command is a good word that we can use. Breath release is another one that we find is really helpful, so that you're not squeezing and tightening to support the sound. You're just releasing air, and usually that's enough to make really, really good sound. Sometimes you need a little bit extra, and then you can find different terminology that helps you figure out what it is that you need for the sound that you're trying to create. Along with that is this idea of, when we're talking about breath management, breath control, breath support, just breath in general, there's this idea of resisting collapse, that you try to expand your body, which you do. As you breathe in, your body expands. And then you're supposed to resist that collapse. You're resisting the natural receding of your body. Well, if you're trying to resist something, then you're creating tension where there doesn't need to be.
You're not fighting against anything. There's nothing pushing against your body that you have to press against to resist, some sort of collapse, as though there's some foreign body outside of you that's trying to press your...
Sometimes there's a voice teacher that's
Sometimes I have had
you.
voice teachers, kind of jam their fists into my belly to make sure that I'm resisting collapse. That's the only thing I've ever had to resist. Instead of thinking of the idea that you have to push against something, that there's something to fight against, we love the idea of just taking up space. Allow your body to continue expanding. Allow it to continue filling up and fueling your voice, so that you're not fighting against anything. There's nothing trying to keep you from singing. There's nothing trying to prevent you from making it through your phrases.
Except yourself, really. And so that's one of my favorite phrases to use as a breath technique thing is take up some space. Allow your body to take up some space. And the difference that makes when I give that little reminder to my students, just remember to take up some space. Oh yeah, that's all I need to do. And then they can sing like crazy. And they stop that resisting, they stop that squeezing and tightening and collapsing. They don't need to resist anything. What else? We got sing out. This is a big one too.
Ooh, yeah.
Projecting we hear all the time from people about projecting your voice, singing out. And the idea behind that, I think the motives behind that are not, well, behind any of these. None of these are like uh, malevolent by any stretch of the imagination. They're not conceived in a bad way, but they can have some negative consequences. So that idea of projecting your voice, I find it kind of tells us that we have to work harder. Like we have to shove our voice out there and throw it out to the audience and like get some muscle to be involved in making that sound come out. And it really generally tends to end up making us hoarse. It makes us feel like we're not doing enough, and so we have to get more muscle involved. And when we get more muscle involved, it just causes more fatigue. It causes more friction, more tension, more resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that this was Domingo who I originally heard this quote from, but I use it all the time. It's don't sing out, sing up. So when we're talking about singing out and pushing our voices out this way, it essentially it negates all kinds of resonance that we can create in our resonators, right, and in our pharynx. And not all types of music are aiming for the same quality of resonance, certainly, but a healthy sound does have some resonance in it.
Right.
And so when we are talking about trying to increase the volume, trying to increase the intensity in our voices, we do so by creating space differently and moving the air through it differently. It's not about shoving. It's not about forcing loudness out. In fact, when we open really big, when we open our mouths really wide and we try to shove all that air out, it ends up diminishing the acoustic energy, the sonic energy that we build that allows us to resonate. So the sound is necessarily less big. There's less volume in it, less ability for it to carry to the back of a hall.
That's right. So it's when we say sing up, it's really getting you to create more of that vertical space that allows you to naturally resonate your sound. And so rather than projecting, I tell people to resonate. When you resonate, you don't have to work harder at all. In fact, you work less and you get more, which usually I think that's a pretty good deal. So by resonating, by allowing for the proper resonating space in our mouth and our throat, we don't have to sing louder. We just get more sound by just naturally those acoustic properties of a resonant space. When you hone them the right way, that's how we can sing. You know, opera singers sing without a microphone over an orchestra into a giant house full of 5,000 people, and we can hear every word. Now, not everybody wants to be an opera singer. Not everybody should be an opera singer, and not every opera singer should try to sing other things too. But when you sing with a microphone, a lot of these same things apply. We had somebody was posted just recently about she sings in her worship band in her church leadership group, and she was going hoarse because she couldn't hear herself in the monitor, so she was pushing for more sound. Well, the same thing can apply when you're singing with a mic. Sing up rather than out, and the mic does the work for you when you have electronic amplification. But you still need to get your voice to work the right way to resonate into that microphone. And so singing up rather than out into that mic can alleviate a lot of those feelings of hoarseness, of strain, of fatigue. So that's Absolutely. What we want to do. We want to resonate, whether
Absolutely.
You're singing opera or worship music or jazz, anything at all.
Yeah.
There's resonance involved, and that's what gets your voice to carry.
And there are scientific evidence that using resonance, that accessing our resonators and allowing the sound to bounce around there before it travels out of our mouths actually helps our vocal folds to function better too. So it's allowing for more efficiency of the breath and more efficiency of the vocal folds, and certainly preventing us from having to use so much muscle, which causes enormous fatigue.
Absolutely.
The next one, and this is one that you talk about all the time, is hitting high notes. Oh man, we do not have to be violent with our high notes.
Notes don't want to get hit any more than you do. So stop hitting them. Stop being so violent with your notes. Just sing them. And here's why. When we think about hitting a high note especially, then we feel like we have to do something percussive with it, or we have like there's an event that has a life of its own. And so we have to do something extra special for it. And we have to give it this extra surge of breath, a surge of energy. And so we get this that happens. And then it stops. We get this like quick burst of air, and then the airflow immediately slows down, if not stops completely. And so we can't do anything with it beyond that. If you think about like when you hit a drum, that's it. You have to hit it again if you want more sound. And we don't want to hit that. We don't want to hit that. No, we want to sustain it or grow it or move through it, take it somewhere. I tell my students to treat that high note or any note, it doesn't even have to be a high note, treat that long note like it's got a story of its own. You're singing us through this journey of this one single note that connects to the journey of the next note. And tell us the story of that one instance in real time, not in one split moment. And so when we sing through it, when we sustain it, when we grow it, when we do something with that note instead of just hitting it, then all of a sudden you have way more artistic flexibility. You can express a huge range of emotions. You can express all kinds of different experiences in ways that you couldn't do if you're just going bang. Yeah. And it's easier to sing too.
I love to think of this as my consciousness moving through each note as I'm singing them. So it's not like I am sending the note out there to happen. It's that I am moving with that note away from me, telling the story. And that's part of being present in your music every moment as it unfolds in real time. Mm-hmm. That doesn't cease to happen when you're singing high notes, right? Mm-hmm. Really important. The other thing about hitting high notes is that when we think that we have to hit a high note, we're usually preparing for that in the notes leading up to it. So we're not present for the approach to the high note either, mm-hmm. because we're just being afraid of, okay, here we go. I got to hit this high note in a minute, right? So allowing yourself to stay present as the music unfolds in front of you, and then just trusting your body that it will sustain the air that is needed for that note.
Yeah. So stop hitting them, just sing them.
Absolutely. Speaking of sustaining,
mm-hmm.
another big one that we hear all the time is talking about a fermata. You hold that note, right? We don't hold it. To hold it means you're stagnating, and nothing can stagnate when we're singing. Everything has to be in constant motion all the time. So instead of holding a note, we talk about sustaining a note, which is different because it means that we're feeding it sustenance. If I'm sustaining my children, I'm not just feeding them one meal when they're babies and hoping it, lasts forever. They can hold on to that meal for many years. That would be gross if they could, actually.
So it would be less expensive.
It would be significantly less expensive, yeah. They need us to feed them all the time, right? All the time. Literally every moment of every day we are feeding our children. And it's the same thing with sustaining a note. We're staying present in it. We are constantly feeding it air and replenishing that air. We are feeding it energy, and we are allowing it to move. It doesn't lock in place.
Because here's the thing. When we use that terminology of holding it, we don't want it to move. We want it to stay right there where we have control of it. But what happens is we end up holding everything in our body as well. So we're holding our breath, and we're not able to keep that breath moving. We feel like we run out of air a lot more quickly. Even though there's still lots of air in there, you're just not allowing that air to be used. You're getting it locked up in there because you're holding on to it. Your body literally gets locked into place because you're holding it. And, you can sing that way, but it doesn't work as well. It doesn't work as well as if you sustain it or grow it or move through it. So same idea with hitting and holding versus sustaining. Do something with that note. Let it go somewhere. Let it tell us a story, and let it be part of the story of the whole song. Yeah. So you might have, I'm noticing sort of a trend too, or not a trend, but a pattern of allowing is a term that we like to use a lot.
All the time.
Rather than making things happen or forcing things to happen. We allow the breath to come out, to come in and to come out. We allow the breath to drop in. We allow the breath to release. We allow the sound to just be there. And I think that has been for me at least, that's been a really powerful one, to just allow my sound,
Yes.
recognizing that my body knows how to do it. My body knows how to make sound and has always known how to make sound since I was a baby.
Right.
And so I don't have to build anything. That was another one.
Yes.
Building
Oh,
your voice.
goodness. We talk about this all the time with other pedagogues. Pedagogues assume that our job is to build voices, but the voice already exists. We're not building anything. We're not constructing anything that wasn't there. We are simply finding it. We are uncovering it. We are allowing it. I talk about, as singers, we're not the drivers of our voices. We're not like in there with a, semi and the steering wheel and pressing the pedals. We are tunnels that our voices can move through. We guide the shape that they move through. We guide, how wide they are, how we're using the energy, how our bodies are allowed to use the energy. But then we're just creating a shape for them to move through. And the shape changes based on what style we're singing. We might think taller if we're singing Handel, and like a little longer if we're singing Aretha, or any number of different ways of thinking about how we move our palates and shape our pharynges while we're singing. But we are not building a voice. What we are doing instead is getting our students out of their own way.
We're removing the impediments to the most free and natural expression of who they are, because your voice is the sonic representation of who you are. It's the sonic manifestation of your spirit, as Steph likes to say all the time. We're getting the impediments out of the way. We're getting all of the baggage out of the way that we've built up over the years of being human beings. And just once you recognize that you can allow for your voice to come forth rather than build it with all of these technique blocks, the technique exists to get the body out of the way of the soul. That's the only reason to learn technique.
Yeah.
Nobody else cares about your technique. They want to experience what you have to share with them through your soul. So technique gets you out of the way of all of that stuff so that you can share that the most authentically and freely by allowing it.
Absolutely.
And this was one that Becky commented on our post about this live stream today. She asked about placement and forward placement specifically.
Oh man. Okay, so that's a big buzzword for me. Many of you have heard this before from me. I do not feel any resonant sensation. I'm a dramatic soprano. I know I have a resonant voice. I hear it in recordings and in rooms when I'm there. I feel no buzz. So what we're talking about, for those of you who might not be as familiar with this language, is that a lot of times once you have figured out how to access resonance, for many singers, certainly not for all of us, he feels a ton.
I feel it when she sings.
People will feel sort of a buzzing sensation or a ringing sensation very often in their faces and their heads, and here in the back of their heads. And this is they're called sympathetic vibrations. It's essentially the same thing that happens when you are pulled up at a red light next to somebody with really loud bass. Your car is vibrating on the pitches that their car is producing, right?
Yeah.
So your car isn't producing any sound, but it is sort of echoing sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all the same things happen with all of the fascial tissue and bones in our heads and faces, that once we have figured out how to access the resonating space, the vibrations that we're producing with our voices and with our resonators can be felt by many, many people in the bones and fascial tissue of their faces.
If you do feel that, it's great, and it can be really helpful to kind of guide what you're doing vocally. And I use that all the time with myself, with my students who also feel that. But this really common terminology that has been developed over years and years of forward placement is sort of falling out of favor now, because it's not really a thing. We don't place the sound. We don't place our voices. They don't, like, here it is. It's like stuck in your mask. The singing into the mask is another way to say that. It's not that at all. So that terminology is sort of falling by the wayside, thankfully. But you are experiencing vibration, whether you feel it or not. Your bones in your face are vibrating, and we get into this whole thing about cymatics and how sound affects matter and how it vibrates things and creates form. But you're vibrating those bones in your face differently depending on the pitch that you're singing and depending on how much, what kind of overtones you're creating. Forward placement, this idea that you have to feel that placement, feel that vibration like in the front of your face, it can actually be really damaging, detrimental, because it for a lot of people it means that they're trying to squeeze something in an unnatural way and get force that vibration to happen. They might end up nasalizing because that's the only way that they can feel that buzzing sensation in the front of their face.
The other thing that we see really, really often, just as something to add to this, is that very often people who are trying to get the sound forward but who don't feel sensation, they tuck the back of their heads and you'll see this face. So whenever you see a singer who's doing this, they're trying to place the sound. Mm-hmm. For those of us who don't feel sensation, there is a whole host of detrimental stuff that we do to try to create that sensation. I can still remember what it felt like when my tongue root was like just a giant fist in the back of my throat, trying to shove that sound as far forward as I could possibly get it to go. Everything was nasal. Everything was too bright. There was no color in my sound. There was no depth. There was no warmth. There was no comfort in singing. I just felt like I had to shove everything out all the time.
Sing out.
Yeah, exactly. Sing out. And so now that I have figured out how to access all of the resonators, I feel nothing in front of my face. But I have so much more access to so much more expression and emotionality and versatility in my voice.
So instead of placing the sound in any specific spot, sometimes I'll talk about, and this is just an imagery thing. This is not an actual what the sound is doing. But for myself and for a number of students, this can be helpful to think about sending your voice, sending your sound, like singing up was one that we talked about. But Becky mentioned in her comment about something that we've covered in a couple of our classes about experimenting with what direction are you sending that sound. Yeah. Now, again, you're not actually just sending the sound that way. What you're doing is directing there are kind of high points of vibrational energy and low points of vibrational energy whenever you make a sound. And so you're directing where those high points of vibrational energy are being experienced the most readily. And so that's where the idea of placement really came from, I think. It just was not understood what was actually happening when that terminology was developed. So really, we're just directing where does that vibrational energy occur the most noticeably. And so sometimes it helps to think of that happening out of the back of your head or up out of the top of your head. Sometimes it does help to think of it moving this way. It's just something for you to play with on your own. Mm-hmm. And if you have a teacher that kind of uses that similar kind of language, to use some guidance from your teacher to say, yeah, that one sounded really good. How did it feel? And understanding what your body feels like when you sing, that's a big part of what we do. Huge, it's really crucial to have that bodily awareness.
Absolutely. So as you're singing these things, as you're playing with the idea of buzz or resisting collapse, expansion and taking up space and all of these things, the biggest takeaway that we hope you will leave this Zoom call with is the idea that you must be aware of your own body. This takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of sort of it's a different kind of work than many of us are used to doing, because it's not busy work, it's just consciousness work, right? We're bringing our awareness to different zones in our bodies to just sort of become aware of what we're feeling.
That's right. So if this is intriguing to you, if you want to learn more about what we do, and if you are wanting to take your voice to the next step, take your singing career to the next step, and get better at what you do, transform your voice and transform your life, then leave us a comment, shoot us a message, get in touch with us, and let's set up a time that we can develop a game plan specific to you and help you achieve your goals with your voice and with your career. So that's all for today.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.